This is Death Dances at the Moulin Rouge, a Hercule Poirot mystery. Welcome back to the Little Grey Cells. I'm Arthur Hastings, and thank you for joining me tonight on this journey into the heart of Bohemian Paris. If you're joining us for the first time, we invite you to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a mystery. The Moulin Rouge has seen scandals and passions, tragedies and triumphs since it first opened its doors in 1889. But it has never seen anything quite like the mystery that unfolds when Hercule Poirot finds himself an unwitting witness to murder most theatrical. Dim your lights, Poirot yourself a tisane, and prepare to exercise your own grey cells. Chapter 1. An evening at the Moulin Rouge. The crimson windmill atop the Moulin Rouge turned slowly against the October sky, its wooden sails catching the last dying light of sunset and scattering it like drops of blood across the cobblestones of the Place Blanche. The effect was both beautiful and ominous, a reminder that even the most festive occasions carry shadows beneath their glitter. Hercule Poirot had not intended to be here tonight. Had, in fact, been looking forward to a quiet evening in his comfortable Paris apartment with a cup of chocolate, a warm fire, and the latest treatise on criminal psychology that had arrived from London that very morning. But fate, in the form of his old friend Inspector Fournier of the Sûreté, had intervened with characteristic abruptness. "You must come, mon ami," Fournier had insisted when he appeared at Poirot's door that afternoon, his usually composed face showing signs of genuine distress that immediately captured the detective's attention. "There is a situation developing at the Moulin Rouge that requires delicacy, discretion, and the finest detective mind in all of Europe. I can provide the first two qualities myself. Only you can provide the third. And without it, I fear we shall have a disaster on our hands." "You flatter me most generously, Fournier, but the Moulin Rouge, it is not precisely my natural habitat. The cancan and the champagne, the noise and the spectacle, these things do not appeal to a man of my temperament and sensibilities." "Which is precisely why you must come. The management expects trouble tonight. Serious trouble of a most violent nature, and they have urgently requested police protection, but they cannot have uniformed officers patrolling their establishment openly. It would frighten away the wealthy clientele and cause irreparable damage to their carefully cultivated reputation. I need someone who can observe without being observed, who can detect danger without being detected himself, who can blend into the background while missing nothing that occurs in the foreground." "You wish me to play the role of an ordinary patron of this establishment? To sit among the champagne and the cancan and the cigarette smoke, watching for criminals while appearing to enjoy the entertainment? I wish you to prevent a murder, Poirot. Or, if prevention proves impossible, despite your best efforts, to solve one with your customary brilliance and dispatch." And so, Hercule Poirot found himself at a corner table in the most famous dance hall in all of Paris, nursing a glass of champagne that he had no intention of finishing, watching the glittering spectacle unfold before him with the analytical eye that had made him the most celebrated detective of his generation. The Moulin Rouge was everything he had expected from its legendary reputation, and nothing like what he had personally imagined. The famous red interior glowed with hundreds upon hundreds of electric lights, their combined brilliance reflected in mirrors that lined the walls and multiplied the crowd into an infinite sea of evening dress and bare shoulders, of jewels and cigars, of painted faces and predatory smiles. The orchestra played with passionate abandon on their elevated platform, the music swelling and falling like waves crashing against a shore, driving the dancers on the floor to ever more frenzied movement as the evening progressed toward midnight. And above it all, on the great stage that dominated one end of the magnificent hall, the performers enacted their legendary show. The cancan dancers with their frothy white petticoats and impossibly high kicks that revealed glimpses of forbidden territory. The acrobats who seemed to defy the very laws of gravity with their aerial feats. The singers whose voices could make strong men weep with longing and weak men feel powerful enough to conquer the world. It was a spectacle designed to intoxicate, to overwhelm, to make the audience forget everything except the moment. Poirot observed it all with a mixture of fascination and disapproval, his detective's eye cataloguing details even as his personal sensibilities recoiled from the excess. The spectacle was magnificent, he could not deny that fact, a triumph of theatrical craft and calculated seduction. But it was also excessive, chaotic, the very antithesis of the order and symmetry and precision that he valued above almost all other qualities. Still, beneath the apparent chaos, he could detect a structure, a carefully choreographed sequence of performances, each building upon the last, each contributing to an overall effect that was far greater than the sum of its individual parts. "You see things others miss, don't you?" The voice came from beside him, and Poirot turned to find a woman taking the seat at his table without invitation. She was perhaps 35, elegantly dressed in midnight blue silk, with dark hair swept up in the fashion of the day, and eyes that held both intelligence and pain. "Forgive me for intruding upon your solitude," she continued, before he could respond to her sudden appearance. "But I was told you would be here tonight, that the famous detective Hercule Poirot himself would be watching over the Moulin Rouge, and I absolutely had to speak with you before it was too late. My name is Marguerite Fontaine, and I have excellent reason to believe that someone intends to kill me before this night is over." Chapter 2. The Dancer's Warning. Poirot studied the woman who had so boldly and unexpectedly inserted herself into his evening. Marguerite Fontaine. The name was familiar to him, though he could not immediately place it in his extensive mental catalogue of persons and events. "You say someone wishes to kill you, Madame Fontaine. That is a most serious accusation, one that demands evidence and explanation. What precisely makes you believe this to be the case?" "I have received threats, anonymous messages that have been appearing with frightening regularity. Anonymous notes left in my dressing room and sometimes slipped under my door at home, warning me that I will not live to see another sunrise. At first, I thought they were the work of a jealous rival, or perhaps an obsessed admirer with an unhealthy fixation. Such things are distressingly common in my profession, or at least in the profession I once practiced. But the threats have become more specific in recent weeks, more detailed in their knowledge of my life. Whoever is sending them knows things about me, about my past, about secrets I have kept buried, things that no stranger could possibly know." "Your profession? You are a performer here at the Moulin Rouge?" For the first time since sitting down, a smile flickered across her carefully composed face, a smile tinged with old bitterness and fresh pain. "I was the star of the Moulin Rouge, Monsieur Poirot. For 15 glorious years I was La Fontaine, the fountain, the dancer whose name alone drew crowds from all across Europe to this very establishment. But that was before the scandal, before everything changed and my world came crashing down around me. And now? Now I am merely the manager's wife, a figurehead, a relic of former glories. I no longer dance. I merely watch others dance and remember what it was like to be young and beautiful and desired by everyone who saw me perform. I sit in the shadows while younger, prettier women take the spotlight that was once mine by right. Your husband is the manager of the Moulin Rouge, Jacques Fontaine. He was a stagehand when I was still a star, a nobody who worshipped me from afar and dreamed impossible dreams. When my career ended in scandal and disgrace, he was the only one who stayed faithful, the only one who did not abandon me. We married 5 years ago, and he has risen through the ranks to manage the establishment that once showcased my talent to the world. A romantic story, one might say. A practical arrangement would be more accurate. I had nothing left after the scandal. No money, no prospects, no future worth contemplating. He had ambition and the willingness to build a new life from the wreckage of my old one. Together, we have created something that functions, something that sustains us both. Or we had, until these threatening notes began arriving, and I realized that my past was not as buried as I had believed. Poirot leaned forward, his grey cells engaging fully with the puzzle that was presenting itself. "Tell me about these threatening notes, madame. When exactly did they begin arriving? What precisely do they say? Every detail matters in matters of life and death." 3 weeks ago. That was when the first note appeared. The first note said simply, "I know what you did in the past. The time for reckoning approaches at last." The second was more specific and more chilling. "The sins of the past cannot be hidden forever beneath silk and champagne. Justice will find you, no matter where you hide." And the third, which arrived just yesterday morning. She paused, her carefully maintained composure cracking for just a moment beneath the weight of remembered fear. The third said, "Tonight, La Fontaine dances her last performance. The curtain falls at midnight." Tonight? You received a specific and unmistakable threat for this very evening? Yes. That is precisely why I sought you out with such urgency, why I could not wait for a more convenient opportunity. I knew the police would be here tonight. Jacques told me he had made an urgent request for their protection, and I hoped desperately that someone among them might take my fears seriously. When I learned that Hercule Poirot himself would be present in this establishment, observing from the shadows, I knew with absolute certainty that I had to speak with you before midnight arrived. How did you learn of my presence here tonight? I was told that my role this evening would be confidential, known only to Inspector Fournier and the establishment's management. Marguerite's smile returned, this time with a hint of her former theatrical charm breaking through the fear. Nothing is truly confidential in the Moulin Rouge, Monsieur Poirot. Secrets are the primary currency of this world, traded, bought, sold, and sometimes stolen. I have been trading in secrets for 2 decades, and I have learned to hear things that others miss, to see things that others overlook, to know things that others believe are safely hidden. Before Poirot could press her further with more questions, the orchestra swelled to a dramatic crescendo and the lights dimmed throughout the hall as all attention was directed toward the stage. A spotlight blazed to life, illuminating a figure at the center of the stage. A young woman in a costume of crimson and gold, her dark hair cascading down her shoulders in carefully arranged waves, her eyes bright with excitement and the unmistakable fire of ambition burning to prove herself. "Mademoiselle Céleste Beaumont," a voice announced with theatrical flourish. performing The Dance of the Phoenix. The music shifted to something exotic and hypnotic, combining Eastern scales with Western orchestration, and the dancer began to move with fluid grace, her body telling a story of death and glorious rebirth, of flames that consumed everything in their path and then transformed destruction into new creation. The audience watched in rapt silence, utterly captivated by the performance that seemed to draw all the light and energy in the room toward the single figure on stage. But Poirot was watching Marguerite Fontaine rather than the stage, and what he saw on her face was not the admiration one might expect from a fellow performer, but something darker and more complex. Jealousy, perhaps, or hatred, or fear of being permanently replaced. The emotions flickered too quickly across her features to identify precisely, but their intensity was unmistakable and deeply troubling. Céleste Beaumont, Poirot said quietly. She is the new star of the Moulin Rouge? She is my replacement, Marguerite replied, her voice carefully controlled. Young, beautiful, talented. Everything I once was. Everything I will never be again. You resent her success? I resent nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I merely observe. Celeste has talent, yes, but she lacks wisdom. She does not understand the dangers of this world, the prices that must be paid for fame. She will learn, as I learned. We all learn in the end. The dance continued, building toward a spectacular climax, as Céleste Beaumont seemed to transform before the audience's eyes, her movements suggesting the mythical bird rising from its ashes. The audience erupted in applause as she took her final pose, the spotlight blazing around her like a halo of fire. Magnificent, someone at a nearby table breathed. But Poirot's attention was not on the stage. It was on the man who had just entered the hall through a side door, moving with the careful purpose of someone trying not to be noticed. He was tall, dark-haired, handsome in a dissolute way, and his evening dress could not quite conceal the tension in his shoulders or the desperate glitter in his eyes. Who is that man? Poirot asked. Marguerite followed his gaze, and her face went pale. That is Philippe Renard, my former lover, the man who destroyed my career. Chapter 3. The Ghosts of the Past. The interval between performances allowed Poirot to gather information from various sources. The waiters who circulated through the hall, the musicians who watched everything from their orchestra pit, and the discreet inquiries that Inspector Fournier conducted in the backstage areas. Philippe Renard, it emerged, was a man of infamous reputation. A decade earlier, he had been one of the most celebrated artists in Paris, a painter whose portraits of dancers and singers had captured the essence of Montmartre's bohemian spirit. He had been Marguerite Fontaine's lover during the height of her fame, and their affair had been the subject of gossip throughout the city. Then, something had happened. Something that ended the affair, ended Marguerite's career, and sent Philippe into a spiral of dissolution from which he had never recovered. The details were unclear, obscured by time and deliberate concealment, but the consequences were evident in the ruin of 2 lives. There was a scandal, Fournier reported when he returned to Poirot's table. Something involving a death, a young man who was found in the Seine. The investigation was inconclusive, but there were whispers that Philippe and Marguerite were involved. Nothing was ever proven, but the damage was done. Marguerite's reputation suffered, and she lost her position at the Moulin Rouge. Philippe's patrons abandoned him, and his career collapsed. And now, both of them are here, tonight, when Marguerite has received death threats. A coincidence, perhaps? I do not believe in coincidence, Fournier. Not when murder is in the air. The second half of the evening's entertainment began, featuring a succession of acts that built toward the climactic cancan that was the Moulin Rouge's signature. But Poirot paid little attention to the performances. His focus was on the various players in the drama unfolding around him. Marguerite Fontaine had retreated to a private box overlooking the stage, where she sat with her husband Jacques, a stocky, practical-looking man whose eyes constantly scanned the room with the wariness of someone expecting trouble. Their body language suggested a marriage of convenience rather than passion, two people bound together by circumstance rather than love. Philippe Renard had taken a table near the bar, where he drank steadily and stared at the stage with an expression that Poirot could not quite decipher. Grief? Regret? Or something more sinister? And Celeste Beaumont, the rising star, moved through the crowd during her breaks between performances, accepting congratulations and admiration with the practiced grace of a born performer. But Poirot noticed that she avoided certain people. Specifically, she avoided any approach toward Marguerite's box, and she turned away whenever Philippe Renard looked in her direction. "There are connections here that I do not yet understand," Poirot murmured to himself. "Threads that bind these people together in ways that are not immediately apparent." As the evening progressed toward its climax, the atmosphere in the hall grew more charged, the champagne flowing more freely, the laughter more forced. It was as though everyone sensed that something was about to happen, that the glittering surface of the entertainment concealed darker currents beneath. At 11:30, Poirot noticed a subtle change in Marguerite's demeanor. She had been tense all evening, but now she seemed almost resigned, as though some decision had been reached. She spoke briefly to her husband, then rose and left the box, disappearing through a door that led to the backstage areas. Poirot followed. Chapter 4. Backstage at the Moulin Rouge. The world behind the stage was a stark contrast to the glamour of the public areas. Here, the illusion was stripped away, revealing the machinery of entertainment, the ropes and pulleys that controlled the scenery, the racks of costumes waiting for their moments in the spotlight, the exhausted performers recovering from their exertions in cramped dressing rooms. Poirot moved through this hidden world with careful attention, tracking Marguerite's path by the reactions of those she passed. A stagehand who nodded respectfully, a dancer who looked away with something like fear, a costumer who clutched her needlework more tightly as the former star swept by. He found Marguerite in a corridor near the principal dressing rooms, speaking in low, urgent tones with a young man Poirot did not recognize. The conversation appeared heated, and when Marguerite noticed Poirot's approach, she broke off abruptly. "Monsieur Poirot, you should not be back here." "Neither should you, perhaps, given the threats against your life. It would be safer to remain in the public areas where there are witnesses." "Safety is an illusion, Monsieur Poirot. I learned that long ago." She turned to the young man beside her. "We will continue this conversation later, Henri. Go now." The young man, Henri, shot Poirot a look of mingled curiosity and hostility before departing. Poirot filed his face away in memory, adding another piece to the puzzle. Who was that young man? No one of importance. A former employee with a grievance about his dismissal.
Such matters are common in the entertainment business.
You spoke with considerable intensity for a conversation about employment matters. Marguerite's eyes narrowed. You observe a great deal, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps too much. I observe what is there to be observed. And what I observe is a woman who claims to fear for her life, yet who ventures alone into secluded areas to have secret conversations with angry young men. This does not suggest someone genuinely terrified of assassination. You think I invented the threats? That this is all some elaborate performance? I think there is more to this situation than you have told me. I think the threats, whatever their source, are connected to events from your past, events that you have not fully disclosed. And I think that before this night is over, those connections will become clear, whether you wish them to or not. Marguerite was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a bitter, weary sound that held no humour. You are everything they said you were, Monsieur Poirot. Very well. You want the truth? I will give you the truth, but not here, not now. After midnight, when the evening's entertainment is concluded, come to my office. I will tell you everything, the whole sordid story of how La Fontaine fell from grace. And the threats against your life? By midnight, the threats will no longer matter. One way or another, the past will finally catch up with me. She turned and walked away, leaving Poirot standing in the corridor with more questions than answers. He glanced at his watch. 11:45. 15 minutes until midnight, when the anonymous threatener had promised that the curtain falls. He made his way back to the public areas, where the cancan was building toward its famous climax. The dancers were a blur of white petticoats and kicking legs, the music a thunderous accompaniment that seemed to shake the very walls of the establishment. At exactly midnight, as the final note of the cancan crashed to its conclusion and the audience erupted in applause, a scream cut through the celebration. A scream that came from somewhere backstage. A scream that spoke of horror and death. The curtain had indeed fallen, but not in the way anyone had expected. Chapter 5. The body in the dressing room. The body was discovered in Celeste Beaumont's dressing room, but the victim was not the young star. It was Philippe Renard, the disgraced artist, lying face down on the floor, with a jeweled dagger protruding from his back. The dressing room was small, cluttered with the paraphernalia of a performer's life, costumes hanging from every available hook, a dressing table covered with makeup and jewelry, photographs and good luck cards pinned to a screen in the corner. Philippe lay amid this chaos, his blood staining the carpet a deep crimson that matched the room's theatrical decor. Inspector Fournier took charge of the scene, ordering the backstage area sealed and beginning the process of questioning witnesses. But he deferred to Poirot when it came to examining the body and the circumstances of its discovery. He was found by one of the stagehands, Fournier reported. The man came to summon Mademoiselle Beaumont for her curtain call and found the door ajar, the light on, and Monsieur Renard in this condition. Mademoiselle Beaumont herself was on stage at the time of the discovery, in full view of hundreds of witnesses. So, she could not have committed the murder, at least, not directly. It would seem not, but her dressing room, her dagger, there must be some connection. Poirot examined the body with careful attention. Philippe Renard had died quickly, the dagger having penetrated his heart with fatal precision. He had not struggled significantly. There were no defensive wounds on his hands, no signs of a fight. Either he had been taken completely by surprise, or he had known his killer and not perceived the danger until it was too late. The dagger, Poirot said, studying the weapon without touching it. It is theatrical. A prop, perhaps? It belongs to Mademoiselle Beaumont.
a shaken voice confirmed.
Celeste herself stood in the doorway, pale and trembling, still in her costume from the final performance. It was a gift from an admirer. I kept it on my dressing table as a decoration. I never thought. When did you last see it in its usual place? Before the show tonight. I always check my dressing room before I perform. A superstition, I suppose. Everything was in order then. And you saw nothing unusual? No one who should not have been here? Nothing. But I was focused on my performance. I would not have noticed anything short of a fire. Poirot turned to the door, examining the lock and the frame. The door was ajar when the stagehand found it. Was it normally kept locked during performances? Always. I have valuable costumes and jewelry in here.
I lock it myself before every show. Yet someone entered, committed murder, and departed, all without forcing the lock. That suggests either a key or the cooperation of the victim.
Philippe might have let his killer in, Fournier suggested. If it was someone he knew, someone he trusted, or someone he feared. Fear can be as effective as trust in gaining access. Poirot's eyes swept the room once more, noting details that would become important later. Tell me, Mademoiselle Beaumont, what was your relationship with the deceased? Celeste's pale face flushed. Relationship? I barely knew him. And yet he was found dead in your dressing room. He must have had some reason to be here, some connection to you that drew him to this particular place. I don't know why he was here. I didn't invite him. Perhaps he came to steal something.
Or to wait for me. I've heard he was unstable, obsessed with the past.
What past? His past with Marguerite Fontaine? The flush deepened. I don't know anything about that. I was a child when all of that happened. I only know the rumours, the whispers that everyone in the Moulin Rouge has heard. And what do those whispers say? Before Celeste could answer, another voice cut in, sharp, commanding, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. They say that Philippe Renard was a murderer who escaped justice. And now, justice has finally caught up with him. Marguerite Fontaine stood in the corridor outside the dressing room, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. Behind her, looking stricken and confused, was her husband, Jacques. You seem remarkably composed, Madame Fontaine, Poirot observed, considering that you believed yourself to be the target of tonight's violence. I believed I might be killed. I never said I believed I would be the only one in danger. Philippe's sins were greater than mine. It is fitting that he should pay the ultimate price first. You speak as though you know who killed him. I know who had reason to kill him. We all had reasons. The question is not who wanted Philippe dead. Everyone wanted Philippe dead. The question is who finally found the courage to act. Chapter 6. The Secrets of La Fontaine. Inspector Fournier established a command post in the Moulin Rouge's administrative offices, where he could interview witnesses and suspects while maintaining control of the crime scene. The establishment had been closed to the public, though the performers and staff were required to remain until they had given their statements. Poirot requested and received permission to conduct his own interviews, beginning with Marguerite Fontaine. They sat in her husband's office, a room that reflected Jacques Fontaine's practical nature. Functional furniture, orderly files, nothing decorative or frivolous. You promised to tell me everything after midnight, Poirot reminded her. The time has come, Madame Fontaine. A man is dead, and I believe you know why. Marguerite lit a cigarette with hands that were steadier than they had been earlier. as though Philippe's death had resolved some internal tension rather than creating new distress.
It is a long story, Monsieur Poirot. A story of love and betrayal, of ambition and revenge.
Are you certain you wish to hear it? I am certain I must hear it. Begin at the beginning.
She drew deeply on the cigarette, her eyes distant with memory. 20 years ago, I was the toast of Paris. La Fontaine, the fountain, the dancer who made men weep and women envy. I had everything: talent, beauty, fame, wealth. And I had Philippe Renard, the most brilliant artist of his generation, who loved me as completely as any man has ever loved a woman. You were happy. Deliriously happy. For 3 years we lived in a kind of paradise. Philippe painted, I danced, and Paris worshipped us both. We were the golden couple, the embodiment of everything the Belle Époque promised: beauty, passion, art, life without limits. But something changed. Everything changed. A young man entered our lives. A boy, really, barely 20 years old. His name was Etienne Beaumont, and he was beautiful and innocent and desperately in love with me. Beaumont? Any relation to? Celeste Beaumont is his younger sister. She was a child when all of this happened, but she knows. She knows everything. The revelation struck Poirot like a physical blow. The connections he had sensed were becoming clear, but they were darker and more tangled than he had imagined. Continue, madame. What happened with Etienne? He pursued me relentlessly. He wrote me letters, sent me flowers, waited outside the stage door every night. I was flattered at first. What woman would not be? But I told him it was impossible. I loved Philippe. I would never betray Philippe. Yet something happened between you and this young man. Marguerite's composure cracked, and Poirot saw the pain she had been concealing.
Philippe became jealous, insanely, irrationally jealous.
He convinced himself that I was having an affair with Etienne, that all my denials were lies. He began to watch me constantly, to question everyone I spoke with, to read my letters before I could open them. Our paradise became a prison. And Etienne? Philippe confronted him. I don't know exactly what was said, but threats were made. Philippe told Etienne that if he did not stay away from me, there would be consequences. And did he stay away? For a while. But love is not so easily deterred, especially young love that has not yet learned the costs of passion. Etienne returned, more devoted than ever, certain that if he could just speak with me, explain his feelings, I would choose him over Philippe. What happened? I don't know. That is the truth. Monsieur Poirot, I do not know exactly what happened. I was performing that night. When I came off stage, I learned that Etienne had been found dead in the Seine. The police ruled it a suicide, but no one believed that. Etienne was too full of life, too hopeful, too determined to win my love. He would never have killed himself. You believe Philippe murdered him? Everyone believed Philippe murdered him. But there was no proof, no witnesses, no physical evidence, nothing that could support a prosecution. Philippe denied everything, and without evidence, the police had to accept his story. But the suspicion remained. The suspicion destroyed us both. My patrons withdrew their support, convinced that I was somehow complicit in the death. Philippe's commissions dried up as society turned its back on him. Within a year, we were ruined. Financially, professionally, socially. Our paradise had become our hell. And your relationship with Philippe ended? How could it continue? Whether or not he had killed Etienne, the suspicion had poisoned everything between us. I looked at him and saw a murderer. He looked at me and saw the cause of his destruction. We parted, and we never spoke again. Until tonight. You spoke with Philippe tonight? Briefly, before the evening's entertainment began. He approached me, tried to apologize, to explain. He said he had carried the guilt for 20 years and could not bear it any longer. He said he needed to confess, to tell the truth before it was too late. Too late for what? He did not say, but he seemed frightened, desperate. He said someone knew the truth about what had happened to Etienne and that they were going to expose him. He asked for my help, for my protection. And what did you tell him? Marguerite's face hardened. I told him that I hoped he rotted in hell. I told him that whatever was coming to him, he deserved it. I told him to stay away from me, or I would tell everyone what I suspected, what I knew about Etienne's death. And then, a few hours later, he was murdered in Celeste Beaumont's dressing room, the sister of the young man he allegedly killed 20 years ago. The irony is not lost on me, Monsieur Poirot. Philippe died surrounded by reminders of his crime, in the room of the woman who has most reason to hate him. If I were writing this story, I could not have devised a more fitting end. Chapter 7. The Dancer's Tale. Celeste Beaumont had changed out of her costume into a simple dress, but she still bore the traces of her performance, the heightened colour in her cheeks, the residual tension in her shoulders, the glitter of stage makeup not yet completely removed. She sat across from Poirot in a small rehearsal room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond his shoulder. You knew who Philippe Renard was, Poirot began. It was not a question. I knew, everyone in the Moulin Rouge knew. The famous artist who had destroyed La Fontaine, the suspected murderer who had never been brought to justice. His name was spoken in whispers, a cautionary tale about the costs of passion. And you knew he was connected to your brother's death. Celeste flinched. Yes, I knew. Yet you said nothing when we spoke earlier. You claimed to barely know him. I lied. I'm not proud of it, but I was frightened. When I saw Philippe's body in my dressing room, I knew immediately what people would think. The sister of his victim, with motive and opportunity, I would be the obvious suspect. So you concealed your knowledge to protect yourself. Wouldn't you? My entire career, everything I've worked for, could be destroyed by this. Even if I'm proven innocent, the scandal will follow me forever. I'll always be the dancer in whose dressing room a murder was committed, the sister who might have avenged her brother's death. Tell me about your brother, mademoiselle. What do you remember of Etienne? Celeste's expression softened, grief replacing fear. I was only 12 when he died, but I remember him clearly. He was beautiful, not just physically, though he was that, but beautiful in his spirit. He saw good everywhere, believed in love and art and the perfectibility of human nature. He was going to be a poet, a great poet, who would change the world. And then he became infatuated with Marguerite Fontaine. Obsessed, more like. He talked of nothing else. La Fontaine this, La Fontaine that. How she had smiled at him, how she had touched his hand, how one day she would realize that he was her true love and leave Philippe Renard for him. We all tried to tell him it was hopeless, that she was committed to another man. but he would not listen. Love had made him deaf to reason. And you believe Philippe Renard killed him over this infatuation? I know he did. Not because I have proof, but because I know what jealousy can do to a man, what it can drive him to do. Philippe saw Etienne as a threat to everything he valued. His love, his pride, his position. He eliminated that threat the only way he knew how. Yet, you never sought revenge yourself? Never tried to bring Philippe to justice? Celeste was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was a child when Etienne died, and by the time I was old enough to act, Philippe had already destroyed himself. He was a ruin, broken, alcoholic, living in poverty. What more punishment could I inflict that life hadn't already provided? But then you came to work at the Moulin Rouge, where Marguerite Fontaine is the manager's wife, and where Philippe Renard might appear at any time. That seems an unlikely coincidence. It was no coincidence. I came here deliberately, to be near the woman my brother loved and the world that had consumed him. I wanted to understand what had happened, why he had died. And yes, I wanted to succeed where he had failed, to make my mark on this place, to prove that the Beaumont name would not be forgotten. A noble ambition, but also a dangerous one, given the history involved. I know, I've always known, but I never intended violence, Monsieur Poirot. My revenge, if you want to call it that, was to succeed, to shine, to become the star that Marguerite once was. That was my victory over the people who had destroyed my brother. And Philippe's presence tonight? His death in your dressing room? How do you explain that? I can't explain it. I didn't invite him there, didn't speak with him, didn't even know he was in the building until I saw his body. Whoever killed him chose my room deliberately, to implicate me or to send a message, I don't know which. Or perhaps, Poirot said slowly, you killed him yourself, then returned to the stage to establish your alibi, trusting that the timing would protect you. That's not true! I was on stage when he died. Hundreds of people saw me. They saw you performing, but the exact time of death is not yet established, and there are gaps in the evening's entertainment when you were not visible to the audience. If Philippe was killed during one of those gaps and found during another, the witnesses prove nothing. Celeste's face went white. You think I'm guilty? I think you had motive, means, and possibly opportunity. I think you have concealed information and told lies, but I do not yet know whether you are guilty of murder. That is what I must determine. Chapter 8. The Husband's Burden. Jacques Fontaine was a man who had spent his life in the shadow of more brilliant personalities. First as a stagehand, watching the stars perform, then as an administrator, serving their needs, and finally as the husband of a woman whose fame had eclipsed anything he could ever achieve on his own. He sat in his office, solid and reliable, answering Poirot's questions with the careful precision of someone who had learned to measure his words. My wife has told you about Philippe Renard, I assume, about her history with him. She has told me a great deal, but I am interested in your perspective, Monsieur Fontaine. You were here during those years. You watched the affair, the jealousy, the destruction. What do you remember? I remember a man consumed by his own demons. Philippe was brilliant, yes, but he was also cruel, possessive, destructive. He could not bear to see Marguerite admired by anyone else, could not accept that her talent was independent of his patronage. He tried to own her, to control her, and when that failed, he destroyed everything, including himself. You believe he killed Etienne Beaumont? Everyone believed it. The only question was whether it could be proven, and it couldn't, so Philippe escaped the official consequences. But there are other kinds of justice, Monsieur Poirot. Life itself can be a punishment, and Philippe's life after the scandal was a long, slow execution. You married Marguerite after her career ended. Why? Jacques' expression softened. Because I loved her. I had always loved her. From the first moment I saw her dance. She was everything I was not. Brilliant, passionate, alive. When she fell, I was there to catch her. When the world turned its back, I remained faithful. I have never regretted that choice, whatever others may think of our arrangement. Some would say you benefited from her destruction. You gained a wife far above your station, and eventually a position of power in the establishment that had once employed you as a common labourer. Some would say many things. I have learned not to care what others say. Marguerite and I have built a life together, a partnership that serves us both. Is it the grand passion she once had with Philippe? No. But grand passions tend to end in tragedy. Our quieter arrangement has proven more durable. And the threats against your wife, the anonymous notes warning of her death? Jacques' composure flickered. Those concerned me greatly. I hired additional security, spoke with Inspector Fournier, did everything I could to protect her. But Marguerite refused to take them seriously. Or rather, she took them too seriously, in a different way. She believed they were connected to the past, to Philippe and Etienne and the sins that had never been expiated. She thought Philippe was sending them? Or someone connected to him? Someone who knew what had really happened and wanted to bring it to light. And what do you believe really happened, Monsieur Fontaine? You were here, in the background, watching everything. You must have seen things that others missed. Jacques was quiet for a long moment, his stolid face revealing nothing of his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I believe that Philippe Renard was capable of murder. I believe that he killed Etienne Beaumont, though I cannot prove it. And I believe that whoever killed Philippe tonight was serving justice. Delayed justice, inadequate justice, but justice nonetheless. You do not seem distressed by his death. Should I be? Philippe destroyed the woman I love. He took her talent, her reputation, her joy in life. Because of him, she has spent 20 years as a shadow of what she once was, haunted by guilt and suspicion. If someone has finally made him pay for those crimes, I can only feel that the world has become slightly more fair. Even if that someone is your wife? Jacques met Poirot's eyes steadily. Marguerite did not kill Philippe. She was with me throughout the evening, except for brief periods when she was in public areas with dozens of witnesses. I can account for her movements completely. A devoted husband would say that, whether or not it were true. A devoted husband would tell the truth, knowing that lies would only make things worse. Marguerite is not a killer, Monsieur Poirot. She is a victim. Philippe's victim, first and last. Whatever happened tonight, she is not responsible. Chapter 9. The Mysterious Henri. The young man Poirot had observed speaking with Marguerite backstage proved to be more difficult to locate than expected. He had given his name as Henri Marchand when questioned by the police, claimed to be a former stagehand dismissed for incompetence, and vanished into the Montmartre night before anyone could verify his story.
Henri Marchand does not appear in our employment records, Jacques Fontaine confirmed when Poirot inquired.
We have had several Henris over the years, but none named Marchand.
Yet your wife seemed to know him well. Their conversation was heated, intense. Not the kind of exchange one has with a stranger.
Marguerite knows many people in Montmartre. She has lived here for decades, performed for years before that. There is no one in this district she could not claim as an acquaintance.
But this was not an ordinary acquaintance. This was someone with whom she had urgent business. Business she did not wish to discuss in front of me.
The search for Henri Marchand consumed much of the following morning. Inspector Fournier deployed his resources throughout Montmartre, questioning the denizens of cafes and cabarets, seeking anyone who could identify the mysterious young man. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Celeste Beaumont, who approached Poirot as he was leaving the Moulin Rouge.
"I know who Henri is," she said quietly, "and I know why Marguerite was speaking with him.
Tell me."
His real name is Henri Beaumont. He is my cousin, Etienne's nephew, the son of our eldest brother who died some years ago. He came to Paris 6 months ago, determined to discover the truth about our family's tragedy.
Another Beaumont, seeking answers about Etienne's death.
He is obsessed with it, just as Etienne was obsessed with La Fontaine. He believes that if he can prove Philippe murdered our uncle, he can restore the family's honor, give meaning to his father's grief-shortened life. I tried to discourage him, but he would not listen.
And his conversation with Marguerite? He has been trying to convince her to testify against Philippe, to reveal what she knows, or what she suspects, about Etienne's murder. He believes she has information that could finally prove Philippe's guilt. Information she has been concealing for 20 years? That is what Henri believes. Whether it's true, I cannot say.
Why did you not tell me this yesterday?
Celeste's face showed shame.
Because Henri asked me not to.
He feared that if his presence became known, whoever killed Philippe might target him next. He thinks there is a larger conspiracy here, that Philippe's death is connected to Etienne's, that someone is eliminating witnesses to protect a secret.
What secret?
I don't know. Henri has theories, but he won't share them with me. He says it's too dangerous, that the less I know, the safer I am. Where is Henri now?
I don't know that either.
He disappeared after Philippe's body was discovered. I've tried to find him, but he seems to have gone to ground. This new information added another layer of complexity to an already tangled case. Henri Beaumont, another seeker of justice, another connection to the tragedy of 20 years ago, had been in the Moulin Rouge the night of the murder. He had motive, he had knowledge, and now he had vanished. Was he a witness, a suspect, or another potential victim? Poirot returned to the evidence with fresh eyes, searching for the connections that would reveal the truth. The pieces were all there, he was certain of it. But the pattern had not yet emerged, the design that would make sense of the chaos.
"There is something I am missing," he murmured. "Something obvious that I have overlooked. What is it?"
The answer, when it came, emerged not from the evidence, but from a conversation. A casual remark that opened new avenues of investigation and revealed the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Chapter 3. Extended. The World of Montmartre. Before continuing his investigation that first evening, Poirot took time to observe the world around him. The unique ecosystem of the Moulin Rouge and the Montmartre district that had spawned it. Montmartre was a world unto itself, perched on its hill above Paris, like a wayward kingdom that had never quite accepted the rules of the city below. Here, artists and poets mingled with criminals and prostitutes,
all of them seeking something that respectable society could not provide. Freedom, perhaps, or inspiration, or simply escape from the constraints of ordinary life. The Moulin Rouge sat at the heart of this world, the red windmill on its roof serving as a beacon for those who sought pleasure and spectacle. It had opened in 1889, the same year as the Eiffel Tower, and had quickly become the most famous entertainment venue in Europe. The cancan had been born here, or at least perfected here, and the dancers who performed it had become celebrities whose names were known from London to St. Petersburg. But beneath the glitter, Poirot knew, lay a darker reality. The performers were often desperate, clinging to their youth and beauty as the only currency they possessed. The patrons were often predators, seeking to exploit that desperation for their own pleasure. And the management walked a careful line between entertainment and exploitation, profiting from both while maintaining a veneer of respectability. "You observe everything with those sharp eyes of yours, Monsieur Poirot," Marguerite said thoughtfully, watching him watch the crowd with evident fascination. "Tell me, what do you see when you look at all these people seeking pleasure and distraction?" "I see a theatre of human nature. Every person here is performing a role. The wealthy man pretending to be sophisticated, the young woman pretending to be experienced, the waiter pretending to be subservient. The only honest people in this room are the dancers themselves, because they acknowledge that they are performing. You are cynical. I am observant. There is a difference." The orchestra struck up a new tune, and the crowd's attention shifted to the stage, where a group of dancers was preparing for the next number. Poirot watched them arrange themselves, each movement precise and practiced, the result of countless hours of rehearsal. "Dancing is discipline disguised as spontaneity," Marguerite observed. "Every kick, every turn, every smile is calculated for maximum effect. The audience sees abandon. We see technique. And yet the technique serves to create genuine emotion. The audience may not understand how the effect is achieved, but they feel it nonetheless. Is that not the essence of all art? Creating genuine feeling through artificial means?" It was a profound question, one that Poirot filed away for later consideration, but his attention was increasingly drawn to the various players in the drama he had been brought here to observe. The drama that would soon turn deadly. Chapter 6. Extended. The investigation deepens. Inspector Fournier's investigation of Philippe Renard's background revealed a man whose decline had been as spectacular as his rise. In his prime, Philippe had been compared to Toulouse-Lautrec and Degas, his portraits of dancers and performers capturing something essential about the human spirit. His paintings had commanded high prices, his company had been sought by the elite of Paris society, and his romance with La Fontaine had been the subject of admiring gossip throughout the city. Then had come the scandal surrounding Etienne Beaumont's death, a scandal that,
though it never resulted in formal charges, had destroyed Philippe's reputation as thoroughly as any conviction could have. His patrons abandoned him within months, Fournier reported. The galleries that had exhibited his work refused to show him. The collectors who had purchased his paintings suddenly found them embarrassing. Within a year, he had gone from the pinnacle of success to near complete obscurity.
And he never recovered?
He tried. There were attempts at comebacks, exhibitions in minor galleries, portraits of clients who either didn't know or didn't care about his reputation. But the magic was gone. His later work was competent, but lifeless, as though the scandal had killed something essential in his artistic soul.
Guilt, perhaps. The knowledge of what he had done weighing on his creativity.
Or simply the loss of inspiration.
Marguerite Fontaine had been his muse as well as his lover. Without her, he could not find the passion that had fueled his best work. The financial records told a story of steady decline. The grand apartment sold, then the smaller apartment, then a succession of increasingly shabby rooms in increasingly unfashionable neighborhoods. The paintings that had once sold for thousands of francs now went for hundreds, then tens, then not at all. By the time of his death, Philippe Renard had been living on the charity of a few loyal friends and the occasional commission for work that could barely be called art.
A cautionary tale, Poirot observed. Success is fragile, and those who climb highest have the farthest to fall.
Do you feel sympathy for him?
I feel understanding.
Philippe Renard was a man consumed by his passions. His love for Marguerite, his jealousy of Etienne, his devotion to his art. Those passions created both his triumphs and his tragedies. He was not a monster. He was merely human, with human weaknesses magnified by human circumstances. He killed an innocent young man. Yes, and for that he paid a terrible price. Not the price of prison or execution, but the price of living with his guilt, watching his life crumble around him, knowing that he had destroyed not only Etienne, but also himself. Some would say that was justice. Others would say it was inadequate. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Chapter 8. Extended. The Nature of Revenge. Poirot's investigation led him to reflect on the nature of revenge and its corrosive effects on those who pursued it. He had seen many cases where the desire for vengeance had driven people to acts that ultimately destroyed them, where the pursuit of justice had become indistinguishable from the pursuit of cruelty. Revenge is a fire that consumes the one who carries it, he mused during a conversation with Inspector Fournier. It provides warmth for a time, but eventually it burns away everything. Compassion, reason, the ability to find joy in anything unconnected to the desired vengeance. You speak philosophically. I speak from experience. I have watched men and women devote years to the pursuit of revenge, sacrificing everything else in their lives for the chance to inflict suffering on those who wronged them. And when they finally achieve their goal, when they finally bring their enemies low, they find only emptiness. The revenge that was supposed to heal their wounds has only created new wounds, new griefs, new regrets. So, you believe revenge is always wrong? I believe revenge is always costly. Whether it is wrong depends on one's moral framework, one's assessment of the original harm, one's willingness to accept the consequences. But the costs are real, and they are paid whether or not one acknowledges them. What about justice? Is that not also a form of revenge? Society's revenge against those who violate its rules? Justice and revenge share certain features, but they are fundamentally different. Justice is measured, proportional, administered according to established rules. Revenge is personal, unlimited, bound only by the avenger's capacity for cruelty. Justice seeks to restore balance. Revenge seeks to dominate.
Justice is a tool of civilization. Revenge is a return to the primitive.
And yet the law sometimes fails. Sometimes the guilty escape punishment, and their victims are left with no recourse but personal action. That is the tragedy of our imperfect world. When the law fails, individuals must choose between accepting injustice and becoming unjust themselves. It is a choice that has no good answer, only various degrees of bad ones. The conversation reminded Poirot why he had devoted his life to detection rather than punishment. His role was to find the truth, to identify the guilty, to present evidence that would allow the proper authorities to administer justice. He did not seek revenge against criminals. He merely exposed them, allowing society to determine the appropriate response.
But he understood those who could not maintain such detachment. He understood the rage that came from seeing loved ones harmed,
The frustration of watching guilty parties escape consequences, the desperate need to do something, anything, to balance the scales. He did not approve of revenge, but he understood it. And sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, he wondered whether his detachment was wisdom or merely another form of cowardice. Chapter 11. Extended. The Psychology of Concealment. In the days before the second attack and the final revelation, Poirot spent considerable time analysing the psychology of the various parties involved, particularly the psychology of concealment that had allowed a murder to go unpunished for 20 years.
Marguerite Fontaine had concealed her knowledge of Philippe's crime because she feared the consequences of disclosure. She had convinced herself that silence was protection, that speaking out would only destroy her without helping Etienne. But her silence had also been a form of complicity, a tacit approval of Philippe's action that had allowed him to escape justice. "I told myself that nothing I said would bring Etienne back," she had explained, "that the only result of speaking would be my own destruction. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of Philippe, afraid of the scandal, afraid of losing everything I had worked so hard to achieve. Fear is a powerful motivator. It can override conscience, silence truth, justify almost any action or inaction. But it doesn't make the choice right. I chose myself over justice, my comfort over Etienne's memory. That was wrong, and I have known it was wrong every day since." Jacques Fontaine's concealment had been different. Not fear, but calculation. Not cowardice, but strategy. He had kept his knowledge hidden because it served his purposes, because it gave him power over both Marguerite and Philippe, because it allowed him to position himself as savior rather than witness. "I told myself I was protecting Marguerite," he admitted during his confession. "But really, I was using the knowledge to my advantage. I knew that as long as I kept silent, she would never learn that I had witnessed her complicity. And that ignorance kept her bound to me, dependent on me, grateful for my loyalty." "You manipulated her." "I loved her. Sometimes love requires manipulation, guiding someone toward what is best for them. even when they cannot see it themselves.
And deciding that what is best for them happens to coincide with what is best for yourself?
I never claimed to be a saint. I am a man with a man's weaknesses and desires. I loved Marguerite, wanted her, was willing to do whatever was necessary to have her. That included keeping secrets, waiting patiently, and eventually, when the opportunity arose, eliminating the man who had stood between us. The psychology of concealment was complex, Poirot reflected, involving multiple motivations that often contradicted each other. People concealed truths out of fear, out of greed, out of love, out of shame. Sometimes out of all these things at once. They convinced themselves that their concealment was justified, that the truths they hid would do more harm than good if revealed. But truth, like water, always found its way through cracks in the containment. Secrets that seemed safely buried would eventually emerge, often at the worst possible moments, causing more damage than they would have caused if disclosed immediately. The effort to maintain concealment created its own burdens, its own costs, its own corruptions. "The truth will out," Poirot murmured, quoting an old proverb. "We can delay it, redirect it, disguise it, but we cannot permanently suppress it. And when it emerges, it often does so with a force proportional to the effort that was spent on its concealment." Chapter 13. Extended. The Trial and its Revelations. The trial of Jacques Fontaine became a sensation in Paris, drawing crowds of spectators and extensive coverage in all the major newspapers. The combination of glamour and tragedy, a murder at the famous Moulin Rouge, involving characters from the golden age of Montmartre entertainment, proved irresistible to the public imagination. Poirot was called as a witness, and his testimony provided the framework for understanding the complex web of relationships and motivations that had led to Philippe Renard's death. "We have here a crime that was 20 years in the making," he explained to the court. "The defendant witnessed a murder in his youth, a murder that was never prosecuted, never punished, never officially acknowledged. He carried that knowledge with him for 2 decades, allowing it to fester, allowing his sense of injustice to grow into an obsession. When he finally acted, he believed he was serving justice, executing a murderer who had escaped the law. But in doing so, he became a murderer himself, subject to the same laws that should have punished Philippe Renard. The justice he sought was transformed into the very injustice he despised." The defense attorney attempted to argue that Jacques' actions were justified, that killing a murderer who had escaped punishment was not a crime, but an act of legitimate vigilantism. But the judge rejected this argument firmly. "The law does not permit private citizens to administer punishment," he ruled. "No matter how guilty the victim, no matter how inadequate the official response, individuals do not have the right to take life into their own hands. To accept such a principle would be to abandon the rule of law entirely, to return to a state of nature where the strong prey upon the weak without restraint." The verdict, when it came, reflected the jury's ambivalence about the case. They found Jacques guilty of murder, but recommended leniency based on the circumstances, the genuine wrong that had motivated his action, the years of torment he had suffered while carrying his knowledge, the fact that his victim had been a murderer himself. The judge imposed a sentence of 20 years, 1 year for each year that Jacques had spent planning his revenge, he noted. It was a substantial punishment, but not the maximum the law allowed. Marguerite attended the trial every day,
watching from the gallery as her husband's actions were dissected and analysed. She never testified. The prosecution decided that her testimony would confuse rather than clarify the issues. But her presence was a constant reminder of the human costs involved.
"He did it for me," she said to Poirot after the verdict. "That's what makes it so terrible. Everything Jacques did, the waiting, the planning, the murder itself, was motivated by his love for me. I was the cause of his destruction, just as I was the cause of Philippe's crimes and Etienne's death. Everything leads back to me. You are not responsible for others' choices. Jacques chose to conceal what he knew, chose to marry you, chose to plan revenge, chose to commit murder. Those were his decisions, not yours. But would he have made those decisions if not for me? Would any of this have happened if I had not existed? If I had not been the centre around which all these passions revolved? The same logic would make every beautiful woman responsible for the crimes committed in her name. It is a seductive argument, but it is false. Philippe killed Etienne because of Philippe's jealousy, not because of your beauty. Jacques killed Philippe because of Jacques' obsession, not because of your existence. They were agents of their own destruction. You were merely the occasion. The occasion that occurred, again and again, at the centre of tragedy after tragedy. Perhaps some women are cursed, Monsieur Poirot. Cursed to bring destruction to everyone who loves them. Or perhaps some women are simply present when destruction occurs, and mistake proximity for causation. The world is full of tragedy, Madame Fontaine, and beautiful women are not its only source. Chapter 10. The Overlooked Witness. The remark came from one of the orchestra musicians, a violinist named Claude Perrin, who had been with the Moulin Rouge for 30 years. "The strange thing," he observed during his interview with Poirot, "is that Monsieur Renard was here at all. He has not been inside this building since the scandal, you know. He was banned. The management at the time made it clear that he was not welcome. Even after Monsieur Fontaine took over, the ban remained in place." Philippe was banned from the Moulin Rouge. Absolutely. It was one of the conditions of Madame Fontaine's continued involvement with the establishment. She refused to work anywhere he might appear, and since she was valuable, first as a performer, then as the manager's wife, her wishes were respected. Yet he appeared last night, entered the building, made his way backstage, and was found in a performer's dressing room. How did he bypass the ban? That is the question, isn't it? Security is tight during performances. We have people at every entrance checking credentials. A banned individual should not have been able to enter at all. This information cast the crime in an entirely new light. Philippe Renard had not wandered casually into the Moulin Rouge. He had somehow circumvented security measures specifically designed to keep him out. That suggested either inside help or a level of desperation that had driven him to take extraordinary risks. Poirot sought out the head of security, a former police sergeant named Dubois, and questioned him about the night's arrangements. "We checked everyone who entered through the main doors," Dubois confirmed. "Staff, performers, patrons, all verified. Monsieur Renard did not pass through any of the public entrances." Then how did he enter? There are service entrances, delivery doors, emergency exits. Most are locked from the inside during performances, but someone with knowledge of the building could potentially access them. Or someone with a key? The keys are strictly controlled. Only senior staff have access to the master keys, and I can account for all of them. What about former employees? Someone who might have retained a key from previous employment?
Dubois' face darkened. That would be a serious breach of security protocols. When employees leave, they are required to surrender all keys. But I suppose it's possible that someone kept a copy without our knowledge. Henri Marchand, or rather Henri Beaumont, claimed to be a former employee dismissed for incompetence, yet no record of his employment exists. Could someone have worked here under a false name, obtained access to keys, and then departed while retaining that access? It would be difficult, but not impossible. Our record-keeping was less rigorous in earlier years, and there have been periods of high turnover when supervision was lax. The investigation of the service entrances revealed that one of the emergency exits, a door leading to an alley behind the building, showed signs of recent use. The lock had been forced at some point, then crudely repaired, so that it appeared functional while actually remaining vulnerable. Anyone who knew about this weakness could have entered and exits the building undetected. Someone planned this carefully, Poirot concluded. Prepared the entrance in advance, waited for the right moment, and executed the murder with precision. This was not an impulsive act. It was a calculated assassination. Chapter 11. The Artist's Confession. Henri Beaumont was located the following afternoon, found hiding in a cheap boarding house in the 18th arrondissement. He came willingly when summoned, his youthful defiance replaced by exhaustion and fear. "I didn't kill him," were his first words to Poirot. "Whatever you think, whatever the evidence suggests, I did not kill Philippe Renard." "Then explain your presence at the Moulin Rouge last night. Explain your false identity, your secret conversations with Marguerite Fontaine, your disappearance after the murder was discovered." Henri slumped in his chair, looking far younger than his 24 years. "I came to find proof. Proof that Philippe murdered my uncle, Etienne. Proof that would finally bring justice for my family." "What kind of proof?" "Marguerite Fontaine knows what happened. She has always known. I came to convince her to testify, to finally tell the truth about that night 20 years ago." "And did she agree?" "She was afraid. She said that if she spoke now, after all these years of silence, it would raise questions about her own role in the tragedy. She said that no one would believe her, that the scandal would destroy her all over again, that she had too much to lose." "What exactly does she know?" Henri hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. "She told me that on the night Etienne died, she saw something. She was performing, as she told you, but she left the stage briefly during a costume change. From the wings, she saw Philippe speaking with Etienne near one of the service entrances. They argued. She could see the intensity of the confrontation, even though she couldn't hear the words. And then Philippe struck Etienne, knocked him down, and dragged him out through the door. She witnessed the assault that led to Etienne's death. She witnessed the beginning of it. She didn't see what happened after they left the building, but she knew. She knew that Philippe had attacked Etienne, had taken him somewhere, had done something terrible. And she said nothing. She let the police rule it a suicide, let Philippe escape justice, because she was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of Philippe. Afraid of what he might do to her if she testified against him. Afraid of the scandal, the questions, the destruction of everything she had built. She chose her career over justice, and she has lived with that choice for 20 years.
And now Philippe is dead, and Marguerite's secret dies with him.
That's what I realized when I saw the body. Whoever killed Philippe didn't just murder a man. They silenced a witness. As long as Philippe was alive, there was the possibility that the truth might emerge. Now, there's only Marguerite's word, and she will never speak.
Unless she has already spoken. Unless someone else now possesses the information you tried to extract from her.
Henri's face showed sudden fear. You think I'm in danger?
I think that anyone who threatens to expose the truth about that night is potentially in danger. Philippe is dead. You have been investigating. Marguerite is afraid to speak.
The pattern suggests that someone is very determined to keep certain secrets buried. But who? Who benefits from Philippe's death and the suppression of the truth? That is what I must determine. Tell me, Henri, when you spoke with Marguerite backstage, were you observed? Could someone have overheard your conversation? I don't know. We tried to be discreet, but the backstage area is busy, crowded. Anyone could have been listening. Then we must assume that someone was, and we must find them before they act again. Chapter 12. The Second Attack. The attack came that evening, as Marguerite Fontaine was leaving the Moulin Rouge after a meeting with her husband. She was walking through the alley behind the building, the same alley where the compromised service entrance had been discovered, when a figure emerged from the shadows and struck her from behind. She fell, dazed but conscious, and managed to scream before her assailant could silence her. The scream brought help, stagehands responding to the commotion, Poirot himself, who had been watching the building's exits. The attacker fled into the Montmartre night, disappearing before anyone could get a clear look at their face. "Did you see anything?" Poirot demanded as he helped Marguerite to her feet. "Any detail that might identify your attacker?" "A man," she gasped. "Tall, strong. He wore dark clothes, a hat pulled low. I couldn't see his face." "Did he say anything?" "He whispered something as he struck me." "No more lies." That's what he said. No more lies. The attack confirmed what Poirot had suspected. The killer was not finished. Philippe's death had been the first act in a larger drama, and those who possessed dangerous knowledge remained in danger. "You must tell me everything now," Poirot insisted. "No more evasions, no more partial truths. What happened on the night Etienne Beaumont died?" Marguerite was taken to her office, where a doctor examined her injuries. A nasty bruise on her head, but no serious damage. When the doctor departed, she finally broke her long silence. "Henri told you what I saw? Philippe attacking Etienne, dragging him out of the building. What he didn't tell you, because I didn't tell him, is what happened next. Tell me." "I followed them. I don't know why. Fear, curiosity, some instinct that told me something terrible was happening. I crept out after them, staying in the shadows, watching as Philippe dragged Etienne toward the Seine." "You witnessed the murder?" "I witnessed enough. Philippe was shouting at Etienne, accusing him of trying to steal me away, of ruining everything. Etienne was pleading, trying to explain that he had never touched me, that his love was pure and hopeless. And then..." She stopped, her composure finally cracking. "And then Philippe pushed him over the embankment, into the river. I heard the splash, heard Etienne's cry for help, heard Philippe laughing, actually laughing, as the current carried his victim away." "You saw Philippe murder Etienne Beaumont?" "I saw it, and I did nothing. I was paralyzed, with shock, with fear, with the knowledge that my lover was a killer." By the time I could move, by the time I could think, it was too late. Etienne was gone, and Philippe was standing there on the embankment, staring at the water. "What did you do?" I ran. I ran back to the Moulin Rouge, changed into my costume, and went on stage as though nothing had happened. I performed the best show of my career that night, because the alternative was falling apart completely.
And you never told anyone what you had seen?
Who could I tell? Philippe was my lover, my protector, my everything. If I accused him of murder, I would lose everything. My career, my reputation, my life. He would have killed me too. I was certain of it. So I stayed silent. And I have stayed silent for 20 years. But someone learned the truth. Someone discovered what you saw. Philippe himself. A few months ago, he contacted me. He was dying. Cancer, the doctors said. And he wanted to make peace before the end. He confessed what he had done, confirmed what I had witnessed, and begged for my forgiveness. Did you forgive him? I told him that forgiveness was not mine to give. He had taken a life. He had to answer to God, not to me. But I also told him that I had carried his secret for 20 years, and I intended to carry it to my grave. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Someone was watching us. Someone saw us meeting, followed us, perhaps overheard what was said. The threatening notes began shortly after, notes that made it clear someone knew the truth and intended to use it. You believed Philippe was sending the notes? At first, but Philippe was genuinely frightened when I showed them to him. He said someone was targeting us both, someone who wanted justice for Etienne after all these years. Henri Beaumont. That was my assumption, but when I met Henri, I realized he didn't have the full picture. He knew I was hiding something, but he didn't know what. The person sending those notes knew everything. Details that only Philippe and I should have known. Unless there was another witness. Someone else who saw what happened that night. Marguerite's face went pale. That's impossible. The area was deserted. I would have seen anyone else. Would you? You were focused on Philippe and Etienne, on the horror of what was happening. You might have missed someone in the shadows. Someone who was watching, just as you were watching. But who? Who could have been there? Poirot's grey cells were working furiously, assembling pieces that had been scattered throughout the investigation. The connections were becoming clear now, the pattern emerging from the chaos. Someone who had reason to be near the Seine that night. Someone who was also involved in the drama of love and jealousy that led to Etienne's death. Someone who has been hiding in plain sight ever since, waiting for the right moment to exact revenge. You know who it is? I believe I do, but I must verify my suspicions before I make any accusations. The truth, when it emerges, will shock everyone, including you, Madame Fontaine. Chapter 13. The Truth Revealed. The gathering took place in the main hall of the Moulin Rouge, the famous space where thousands had danced and drunk and loved, now transformed into a theatre of justice. Inspector Fournier had assembled all the relevant parties: Marguerite and Jacques Fontaine, Celeste and Henri Beaumont, and the various staff members who had been present on the night of Philippe's murder. Poirot stood before them, his grey cells having finally assembled the pieces into a coherent picture. "We have here a crime that spans 20 years, he began. A murder that led to another murder, a chain of cause and effect that has finally reached its conclusion. But before I reveal the killer's identity, you must understand the full story.
The story that began on a summer night 2 decades ago, when a young man named Etienne Beaumont died in the Seine.
He recounted the events as he now understood them. Etienne's obsessive love for Marguerite, Philippe's jealousy,
The confrontation that led to violence, the murder on the banks of the river.
Madame Fontaine witnessed this murder, Poirot continued.
But she was not the only witness. There was another person present that night. Someone who saw everything. Someone who has carried that knowledge in secret ever since.
He turned to face the person he had identified as the killer.
That person was you, Jacques Fontaine.
A gasp went through the assembled group. Jacques himself showed no surprise, only a weary resignation, as though he had been waiting for this moment for years.
You were a stagehand at the Moulin Rouge in those days,
Poirot continued.
You had worshipped Marguerite from afar, watched her romance with Philippe with jealous anguish, dreamed of a day when she might notice you. On the night Etienne died,
You followed Philippe and Marguerite, not knowing what you would discover. I saw everything, Jacques confirmed, his voice flat. I saw Philippe kill that boy, and I saw Marguerite watch him do it. I saw her run away, and I saw Philippe standing there, looking satisfied with what he had done.
But you did not report what you saw to the police.
How could I? I loved Marguerite, and she was implicated. If I testified against Philippe, she would be destroyed as well, accused of being an accessory, of knowing and doing nothing. I decided to protect her, even though she didn't know I was protecting her.
And so you kept silent, just as she kept silent. 2 witnesses to murder, each concealing the truth for their own reasons.
I thought I was being noble. I thought I was sacrificing my conscience for love. But really,
I was just a coward who couldn't face the consequences of doing the right thing. Years passed. Marguerite's career ended, and you were there to pick up the pieces. You married her, rose to a position of power, built a comfortable life. But the secret remained, festering like a wound that would not heal. I never forgot what I had seen. Every time I looked at Marguerite, I remembered that night. Every time I heard Philippe's name, I felt the rage building inside me. He had killed an innocent boy. He had destroyed the woman I loved, and he had gotten away with it. And then, a few months ago, you learned that Philippe was dying. You learned that he was seeking forgiveness, making peace with Marguerite. And you realized that he might die without ever facing justice. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. He had taken so much, caused so much pain. And now he was going to slip away peacefully, mourned by no one, punished by no one. I couldn't let that happen. So you began sending the threatening notes. You wanted to frighten Marguerite, to remind her of the sin she had helped conceal. And you wanted to draw Philippe out, to bring him back to the scene of his crimes. I wanted them both to suffer, to feel some fraction of the fear and guilt I had carried for 20 years. And yes, I wanted to kill Philippe. I had dreamed of it for decades, and now I finally had the opportunity. You prepared carefully. You compromised the service entrance, ensuring you could enter and exit the building without detection. You waited for a night when the Moulin Rouge would be crowded, when confusion would provide cover for your actions. The night of the celebration, when everyone would be focused on Celeste's performance. I knew Philippe would come. The notes had been designed to draw him here, to the place where his crime had begun. And I knew that Celeste's dressing room would be the perfect location. A symbolic justice, the sisters' space becoming the site of the killer's death. You waited in the dressing room, knowing Philippe would seek you out. He had been trying to speak with various people all evening, trying to confess, trying to find someone who would absolve him. When he found you there, he probably thought you were an ally, someone who could help him. He didn't recognize me at first. I had changed so much since those days. Older, heavier, no longer the invisible stagehand who watched from the shadows. But when I told him who I was, when I reminded him of what he had done, he understood. He knew that his past had finally caught up with him.
And you killed him?
I did what should have been done 20 years ago. I executed a murderer. I brought justice to a case that the law had failed to resolve.
You also attacked your own wife, just hours ago.
Jacques' face showed genuine distress. That was not supposed to happen. Henri Beaumont was getting too close to the truth, and I needed to create a distraction, to make it appear that the killer was still at large, still targeting witnesses. I never intended to seriously hurt Marguerite, just to frighten her, to make everyone look in the wrong direction.
You have spent 20 years married to a woman you love, and yet you were willing to attack her to conceal your crime.
I was willing to do anything. Don't you understand?
Philippe Renard destroyed everything. Etienne's life, Marguerite's career, my peace of mind. He deserved to die, and I was the only one willing to deliver the justice he deserved. Justice! Poirot's voice was sharp. You speak of justice, but what you delivered was revenge. Justice is measured, proportional, administered by society through proper channels. What you did was take the law into your own hands, make yourself judge and executioner. Decide that your grievances outweighed Philippe's right to live. He was a murderer. And now, so are you. You have become the very thing you hated. Philippe killed out of jealousy and rage. You killed out of jealousy and rage. The motivations may differ, but the act is the same. You are no better than the man you murdered. Chapter 14. The Aftermath. Jacques Fontaine was taken into custody, his confession witnessed by everyone present. He went quietly, without resistance, looking almost relieved that the burden of his secret had finally been lifted. Marguerite watched him go with an expression that Poirot could not decipher. Grief, perhaps? Or betrayal? Or something more complicated? She had been married to a man who had witnessed her darkest moment and kept that knowledge hidden for decades. She had trusted him, relied on him, believed he loved her unconditionally. And all along, he had been planning revenge.
I don't understand,
she said finally.
Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he say that he knew? Perhaps because he feared your reaction,
Poirot replied. If you learned that he had witnessed Philippe's crime, you would have realized that he could expose you at any time. Your entire relationship would have been shadowed by that knowledge. So he kept silent to protect our marriage. He kept silent because silence suited his purposes. As long as you believed your secret was safe, you were dependent on the illusion of security. If you knew that he knew, you might have left him, might have sought other protections. His silence kept you bound to him.
All those years, and I never suspected.
No one suspected. Jacques Fontaine was the invisible man, overlooked, underestimated, dismissed as merely the humble husband of a former star. That invisibility was his greatest asset, allowing him to observe without being observed, to plan
without being suspected. What will happen to him now?
He will face trial for the murder of Philippe Renard and for the attack on yourself. The outcome will depend on many factors: the skill of his attorneys, the sympathy of the jury, the judge's interpretation of the circumstances. But he confessed in front of witnesses. There is no doubt of his guilt.
And me? I concealed a murder for 20 years. I let an innocent young man's death go unavenged. Am I not also guilty?
You are guilty of concealment, of cowardice, of choosing self-preservation over justice. But you did not commit murder, and the statute of limitations has long since passed on any charges that might have been brought against you. The law cannot punish you.
Marguerite, only your conscience can do that. My conscience has been punishing me for 20 years. That's why I could never truly enjoy anything. Not my career when I had it, not my marriage, not my life. Every success felt hollow because I knew it was built on a foundation of lies. Then perhaps this revelation will bring you some peace. The truth is finally known, and you are free of the burden of concealment. Free? Marguerite laughed bitterly. I will never be free. The ghost of Etienne Beaumont will haunt me until the day I die, and now the ghost of Philippe will join him, and the ghost of my marriage, and all the other ghosts that have accumulated over the years. I am surrounded by the dead, Monsieur Poirot, and no amount of truth can bring them back to life. Celeste Beaumont approached as Marguerite fell silent, her young face showing a mixture of emotions that she had not yet learned to conceal. I want to thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for finding the truth about my brother's death, for finally bringing someone to justice, even if it wasn't the person I expected. Philippe Renard was the primary murderer, Poirot reminded her. Jacques Fontaine killed a man who had already taken a life. In a sense, justice has been served twice, once by Jacques' actions, and once by his arrest. Two wrongs don't make a right. Isn't that what they say? They say many things, mademoiselle. What matters is what you believe, what helps you find peace. I don't know if I can find peace. My brother died because he loved unwisely, and 2 more men have destroyed themselves trying to avenge him. Philippe through his own guilt and paranoia,
Jacques through his misguided sense of justice. It's as though Etienne's death was a stone thrown into a pond, and the ripples have been spreading outward for 20 years. An apt metaphor. Violence begets violence, and the consequences of a single act can extend far beyond what anyone anticipates. Your brother's death was a tragedy, but the tragedies it spawned have multiplied the suffering many times over. What happens now? To the Moulin Rouge, to all of us. The Moulin Rouge will survive. It has survived scandals before, and this one will fade into history like all the others. You will continue your career, if you choose. Henri will return to his studies or his work. And Marguerite will face the rest of her life knowing that her secrets have finally been exposed. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like everything is still in motion, still unresolved. That is the nature of justice, mademoiselle. It closes some accounts, but opens others. It answers some questions, but raises new ones. The neat conclusions we see in fiction rarely exist in reality. Henri Beaumont joined them, his young face showing the strain of the past days. I've been thinking about what you said, Monsieur Poirot, about revenge and justice, about becoming the thing you hate. Do you believe that's true? I believe that the pursuit of revenge often consumes the pursuer. Jacques Fontaine spent 20 years planning his vengeance, and in the end,
he destroyed himself as thoroughly as he destroyed Philippe. If he had reported what he saw when it happened, justice might have been served without all the suffering that followed. But the system failed.
Philippe was never prosecuted for Etienne's murder.
The system fails, often, but that does not justify taking the law into our own hands. When individuals decide they have the right to punish, they become tyrants, accountable to no one, bound by no rules, limited only by their own sense of righteousness. So, we should simply accept injustice? Allow murderers to escape punishment? We should work to improve the systems of justice, to make them more fair and more effective. We should advocate for the victims, ensure that their stories are heard, that their suffering is acknowledged. But we should not become killers ourselves, no matter how righteous our cause may seem. Henri was silent for a long moment. I came to Paris to find justice for my uncle. I thought I was doing something noble, something that would honor his memory.
Instead, I've seen more violence, more destruction, more lives ruined.
Maybe the best way to honor Etienne is to stop seeking revenge and start seeking understanding.
That would be a worthy tribute to his memory. Your uncle died young, his potential unfulfilled. You have the chance to live the life he never could, to achieve the things he might have achieved. That is a form of justice too, ensuring that his death does not define your life, but rather inspires you to live more fully.
Chapter 15. The Dancer's Choice. A week after the arrest of Jacques Fontaine, Poirot received a visit from Céleste Beaumont. She came to his Paris apartment bearing a gift, a bottle of fine champagne from the Moulin Rouge's cellars.
The management wanted to thank you,
she explained,
for solving the case,
for protecting the establishment's reputation, for ensuring that the truth came to light. The truth always comes to light eventually. I merely hastened the process. Nevertheless, you have the gratitude of everyone at the Moulin Rouge. And you have mine, personally.
You have made a decision about your future, I think.
Celeste smiled. Am I so transparent?
Your demeanor suggests resolution, the lifting of uncertainty. You have chosen your path.
I'm leaving the Moulin Rouge. I've been offered a position with a dance company in New York, a chance to develop my art in new directions, away from the shadows of the past. I'm going to take it.
A wise choice. Paris holds too many memories, too many associations with tragedy. In America, you can be whoever you wish to be.
Create whatever future you desire.
That's what I'm hoping. I'll always carry Etienne with me. He was my brother, and his death shaped who I am. But I don't want his death to be the defining fact of my existence. I want to live, to create, to become something more than the sister of a murdered man. He would want that for you, I think. From what you have told me of Etienne, he loved life, loved beauty, loved the possibility of transformation. Honor that love by transforming yourself. I will, and I'll remember you, Monsieur Poirot, the man who finally brought truth to a story that had been shrouded in lies for 20 years. Remember the truth itself, mademoiselle. It is more important than the man who uncovered it. After Celeste departed, Poirot sat for a long time in his comfortable chair, sipping the champagne and reflecting on the case. Death dances at the Moulin Rouge. That would be the headline, he suspected, when the newspapers finally got hold of the full story. The phrase captured something essential about the world he had glimpsed, a world where beauty and danger intertwined, where passion led to destruction, where the pursuit of pleasure masked darker appetites. The Moulin Rouge had been built to celebrate life, to provide an escape from the mundane realities of existence. For more than 30 years, it had offered music and dance and spectacle to those who sought entertainment. But beneath the glitter, human nature remained unchanged, jealous, violent, capable of both great love and great cruelty. Etienne Beaumont had died because he loved too intensely.
Philippe Renard had killed because his jealousy knew no bounds. Marguerite Fontaine had concealed the truth because she feared the consequences of honesty. And Jacques Fontaine had planned murder for 20 years because he could not let go of his resentment. All of them had been dancers, in a way, performing roles for the world, concealing their true selves behind masks of respectability. The Moulin Rouge was merely a more obvious stage, a place where the performance was acknowledged rather than hidden. "We are all performers," Poirot murmured to himself. "We all dance to music we did not compose, following steps that others have choreographed. The question is whether we have the courage to break free from the performance, to show our true faces, to live authentic lives." He raised his glass in a silent toast, to the dead, to the living, to the truth that had finally emerged from the shadows. The cancan would continue at the Moulin Rouge, the windmill would turn against the Paris sky, and new dancers would take the stage, dreaming of fame and glory. But some of them, at least, would know the cost of those dreams. They would remember the story of La Fontaine and her lovers, of jealousy and murder, and 20 years of concealment. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would choose a different path. Chapter 16. Epilogue. 6 months later, the trial of Jacques Fontaine concluded with a verdict that surprised no one. He was found guilty of murder in the second degree, the jury accepting that his actions, while criminal, had been motivated by a genuine desire for justice rather than simple malice. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a punishment that seemed fitting given the 20 years he had spent planning his crime. Marguerite Fontaine sold her shares in the Moulin Rouge and retired to the south of France, where she lived quietly, avoiding the spotlight that had once been her natural habitat. She never remarried, never returned to performing, and gave only one interview, a lengthy conversation with a historian writing a book about the Belle Époque, in which she told the full story of her relationship with Philippe Renard and its tragic consequences. "I was a coward," she admitted in that interview. "I chose my career over justice, my comfort over truth. If I could live those years again, I would do things differently. But we cannot relive the past. We can only learn from it and try to do better in the future." Henri Beaumont returned to his studies, eventually becoming a lawyer specializing in cases involving wrongful death and inadequate investigations. He dedicated his career to ensuring that families like his own would have advocates when the justice system failed them. "I learned from Monsieur Poirot that revenge destroys the avenger," he said in a later interview. "The best way to honor my uncle's memory is not to punish those who harmed him, but to prevent similar harms from befalling others." Celeste Beaumont found success in New York, as she had hoped. She became a choreographer as well as a dancer, creating works that explored the themes of love and loss, passion and destruction. Her most famous piece, titled Ripples, traced the consequences of a single act of violence across multiple generations, a work that critics praised for its emotional depth and technical brilliance.
"Every story has more than one ending," she said, in accepting an award for the piece. "My brother's story ended in tragedy, but the story of our family continues. We carry his memory forward, transform his suffering into art, ensure that his life, though short, was not meaningless." And Hercule Poirot? He returned to his orderly existence, his chocolate and his tisane, his systematic approach to the chaos of human behavior. But sometimes, late at night, he would hear music drifting from somewhere in the Paris streets, the distant echo of a cancan, perhaps, or the haunting melody of a forgotten waltz. And he would remember the Moulin Rouge, the crimson windmill turning against the sky, the dancers kicking their legs toward heaven. Death had danced there, as death dances everywhere. But life danced there too, and love, and hope, and all the complicated emotions that made humanity both beautiful and terrible. The Moulin Rouge was a mirror of the human condition, garish, excessive, sometimes vulgar, but also vital and irrepressible and endlessly, magnificently alive. That was worth remembering. That was worth celebrating. Even when the dance led to darkness, the dancing itself was a triumph over the void. The cancan continued. The windmill turned. And somewhere in the Montmartre night, a new dancer was beginning her journey toward the stage, carrying dreams of fame and glory, unaware of the costs that might be demanded. Such was the nature of the world. Such was the lesson of the Moulin Rouge. Thank you for joining us on The Little Grey Cells for Death Dancers at the Moulin Rouge. If this tale of passion, jealousy and justice, long delayed, captured your imagination tonight, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Did you suspect Jacques Fontaine before his role as the killer was revealed, or were you focused on the more obvious suspects? The bitter Marguerite nursing her decades of resentment, the mysterious Henri Beaumont seeking answers about his uncle's death, the rising star Celeste, whose dressing room became a crime scene. What did you think of the chain of consequences that linked a murder 20 years in the past to a violent death in the present? How one crime spawned another, how secrets festered until they poisoned everyone who carried them. And the Moulin Rouge itself, does such a legendary place of pleasure and spectacle seem a fitting backdrop for tragedy? Or does the contrast between the glitter and the darkness make the story more striking and memorable? These are questions worth pondering as you reflect on tonight's mystery. We love hearing from fellow mystery enthusiasts around the world, and your engagement helps us bring more tales of the little Belgian detective to life. Until next time, keep those grey cells active and thoroughly well exercised. Remember that the pursuit of revenge often destroys the pursuer as surely as it destroys the target. And trust that truth, even truth delayed by decades of deliberate concealment, eventually finds its way into the light, where it belongs. The red windmill of the Moulin Rouge continues to turn against the Paris sky, as it has for more than a century. And the cancan will be danced again tomorrow night, just as it was danced last night and the night before. But those who know the full history of that legendary establishment will see the shadows beneath the spectacle, the grief beneath the gaiety, the eternal dance between life and death that gives the place its strange, dark, irresistible beauty. Farewell, dear listeners, and may your own dances through life lead you toward joy rather than sorrow, toward truth rather than concealment, toward the light that shines even in the darkest corners of the human heart.